Hello, welcome to Pastors for Yang. You are with me today. Um, Today I thought we would talk about abortion, that topic, and doing a little bit of a deep dive into its policy and just kind of seeing where that discussion goes. So please, if you're watching live, go ahead and the conversation. Let me know in your comments what you think. But I'm just going to kind of do an overview. First, I'm going to start before getting into the actual policy. Um, let's talk about why. So, why is this is a fairly important topic, not only for me, for evangelical Christians, for conservative folks. The idea of abortion, the conflict about abortion. Who should be able to do that? Should it be able to be done in the first place? What are the moral implications? All of that sort of stuff, all kind of folded into this whole thing. And it is a very emotional topic. I understand that. I completely understand. I myself am pro-life. I do think that we should be upholding life as much as possible. But I also recognize that there are not people like me. There are people who are in situations where abortion is maybe their only option or one of their better options. And that's a challenging thing. But the other reason I'm lifting this up, I had a conversation with my mother-in-law, working on slow ganging her as well, and this was the first thing that came up. What about abortion? What is his stance on it? And this is an important thing that we need to talk about and think about, and it's an important moral issue for us, and we need to really be aware, as Christians, as voters, about kind of what does this look like. Now, Andrew Yang is not against abortion, which is not unsurprising. He is running as a Democrat. That's not necessarily something. He also tends to stay away from the moral side of things, and it's much more looking at numbers. How do we actually fix problems? And this is not something that is too big on his things that he's trying to do. So there you go. But let's look at what the actual policy is, shall we? Let's look here. This is from Yang 2020, the main website, right? So it's the right to privacy, abortion, and contraception. Let me see, actually, I could probably, yeah, well, let's do that. So, in a perfect world, only those who are ready for and desire a child would become pregnant. But that's not the world we live in. So that's a great way to start out, right? Because, again, in a perfect world, first of all, and I might add as well, right? So in a perfect world, only people who want to have children would actually get pregnant, would have children. Sure, that would be great. Only in a perfect world would we not then, in that same perfect world, we would not have to do abortion. That would not be an issue because only those who are ready and want to have children would have children, and those who would not have would not be ready, or for all the various ways that we might decide to or to not have children, those people would not be getting pregnant. So, in a perfect world, there would be no abortion. Okay, I'm with you there, right? Let's look. So everyone has a right to bodily integrity, and more needs to be done to ensure that women have and maintain that right. Access to birth control should be provided to all Americans. It should be the decision of each individual whether she wants to use it, not a decision made for her by her doctor, family, or where she lives. In essence, I'm behind this. Now, the counter argument, of course, from the Christian side of things is, okay, great, a woman does have that decision over her body. Sure, right. I behind that. The moral implication is, well, does she have that authority, or does she have that right to make decisions for this child? That's kind of where the moral side of things comes in. But in essence, I can get behind the idea, or this stance, that a woman does have. You know what? I, as a man, cannot make that decision on behalf of a woman at all, because I am not a woman, right? And I'm not the woman that we're talking about. This is a lot along the same lanes as everything that we talk about in a Christian church, right? Or it should be, because I, as me, don't get to make decisions for you, right? What is sin? What do you need to do in your personal life? How do you need to respond to the saving grace of Jesus Christ? I can't make that decision for you. My community cannot make that decision for you. You have to make that decision. That's down on you, right? And you will be held responsible for those decisions. Same thing here, right? A woman has the responsibility, has the right to make those decisions on her own behalf. I'm behind that. I have no problem. Let's look on. I think there's switch over to the second column. Access to safe and affordable abortion services should also be provided to all Americans. Requirements placed by individual states on access should be subject to oversight by a board of doctors, not the whims of legislators who have no background on the procedure or even the basics of medicine. Yep, absolutely, right? This should be overviewed, and I notice you may notice as well that this is reviewed by doctors, and not so people who have no understanding of what's actually going on here, either for or against, right? They're actually aware of what the medical issues here are. And I would suggest that this is actually a fairly bipartisan thing as well, right? Because there are conservatives who absolutely say, yeah, we should just completely ban abortion, and have no idea what they're talking about. Absolutely. There are also, I would submit to you, there are liberals and progressives who say, oh, absolutely, we should always have this right to choose, and don't really know what's going on, right? There are many, there are unfortunately a lot of stories about there are abortion facilities which are simply unclean, that are not taken care of well, and that's part of the some of this conversation is around, we should bring these facilities under a medical review, and they need to hold up to medical standards. There was one, I don't remember. It was I know, in definitely a minority area, but there was a clinic, and as they looked back in the records, they found that gonorrhea was like huge. It was huge in this area, and a good deal of it was because women were coming to this particular facility, and they were having various procedures done, including having abortions, and they were coming away with STDs. That is not acceptable, right? If we're talking about this thing where, okay, yes, maybe you should have access to it, but you should also have access to it in a place that is medically sterile, and all of those sorts of things. Doctors should be reviewing these things, right? This should be available for those who want to make that decision, right? Again, I'm not super happy about that necessarily, but I do believe that people should have the right, and specifically women should have the right to make this decision for themselves, and that decision should not be based on, how many state lines they have to cross to do this. It should be a well-reasoned. Let's actually think about all of the implications here. So that's something to consider as well. Going on. The two most effective ways to decrease the number of abortions are to provide every woman with access to contraceptives, and to provide financial, emotional, and structural support to individuals who are financially struggling and become pregnant. Universal basic income would accomplish this for many prospective parents. So here, again, everything goes back to UBI, because everything goes back to UBI, right? Here he's saying Here, the policy is that there are two ways to decrease the number of abortions. Here, the assumption is not, oh, abortions are great and we should do them all the time. And that doesn't, I imagine that that argument is never actually made except for people who are against abortion making it on behalf of people that they don't understand. But that's not what's going on here, right? It is, hey, we don't think that these should happen all the time. We don't think that abortion is necessarily a good thing in itself. Ultimately, it's something that should be reduced. The two things that are going to reduce abortions the most are, one, access to contraceptives. Duh. That seems like a no-brainer. Abstinence-only sex education is not a viable answer because it doesn't actually help. I think personally, from my perspective as a pastor, I think abstinence as an option should be laid out there, and it's actually, frankly, something that we should be within the church and outside of the church. That's abstinence is an option for some amazing people that we might hold up have been abstinent and as a choice. Now, Paul lifts this up in 1 Corinthians, and he says, I wish that everyone had that ability like I do to abstain from sexual activity. Cool. I'm behind him. I understand. It's not something that I can do. That's one of the reasons I'm married, right? I don't have that ability to do that, maybe. So that should be one of the options, just to lay it out there. Let's not necessarily assume that everyone's going to have sex. But we also should educate youth, kids, like adults. How do we do this in a more safe manner? If you have access to contraceptives, there's going to be less pregnancies. It's just, that's how that works, right? That's the whole purpose of contraceptives. Now, again, access is not your message. You don't get a condom in the mail every day or something like that, right? This is, you have access to it. You have to make your decisions. There are some in the Roman Catholic Church who say contraceptives are straight out. That's not something that we should be doing. Okay, sure. You have that option. You have that ability to make that decision. That doesn't mean that everyone does, right? There are married people who decide that this is not the time in their life that they need to have children. So they use contraceptives in a way that says, that doesn't say, oh, we don't trust God, but to say, hey, we have this ability to restrict pregnancy at this point so that we don't have to make that decision between life or death. So fewer pregnancies obviously are going to result in fewer abortions. That makes sense, right? So if we provide that as an opportunity for anyone has this access, then we're going to see fewer pregnancies. Now, the counter argument to this is oftentimes, well, it's at every drugstore. You could just go and get contraceptives whenever you want to. For what price? That's the challenge, right? Because we make the assumption as sort of majority folks that, oh, okay, great. You just go down to the drugstore and you pay however much for that box of condoms or whatever it is. Not everyone has the disposable cash to do that. So how do we make those available for everyone? Because what we're talking about is minority groups, right, are overusing abortion. And there are lots of different reasons for that. One of them is the fact that Planned Parenthood was created by a person who thought that she should eliminate all of Black people. That's part of it. But a lot of it is that minority groups are in that position where they don't have access as much to contraceptives. There's a culture of either welfare or that sort of thing, and that's part of this. It doesn't really get into abortion, but there are just more pregnancies, and there are more problematic pregnancies as well, which is not something we want to talk about either. A minority woman is not listened to in the same way as a majority woman. That's just how things work, and it sucks. But that's where we are. And so there are some women who are forced into abortion for health reasons, and that happens a lot more in the minority community than in a majority community. So there's lots of things going on here. But access to contraceptives is going to reduce the number of pregnancies, which is going to reduce the number of unwanted pregnancies. That's simple logic. It's not that complicated, right? The other major thing is a lot of people who contemplate abortion are doing so because of their financial situation. If I can barely get by, if we can barely get by, how in the world are we going to raise a kid? Because guess what? Kids are expensive. They are really expensive, right? So how are we going to do this? And if you don't have the disposable income to, let alone, provide for contraceptives, how are you going to provide for a child? So providing a universal basic income, freedom dividend, that is going to reduce the amount of abortions, because there are going to be more families who, if they actually do get pregnant, they realize we can do this. There are more women who may find themselves pregnant and they say, I can do this. I can have a child. I can support a child. So that's going to reduce the number of abortions. So ultimately, this is yes, this should be provided, but it's also this is how abortions are going to be reduced. Now, there are some of my brothers and sisters are going to be pretty hardcore about this and say, oh, well, as long as he's not completely outlawing abortion, I don't want to have anything to do with it. Okay. But I might submit to you, creating a system in which there are considerably fewer abortions, that moves us along the way, right? It's better than where we are now. So I think that would be a plus for us. So something to consider. Let's look into more of this, because there's more information as we get lower. It's going to be to see. So problems that are solved is the right of many American women to have control over their bodies is being unconstitutionally eroded by legislators with no medical background. That's the problem, and this would solve that problem. We should donate, right? Whether to have a child is an immense personal decision. In my view, it is solely up to the woman what course to take. As a society, we should support mothers in ways big and small if they do decide to have children. I respect the feelings that many Americans have on this issue and appreciate the values one brings to bear, but it should always be up to the woman what to do. I have the feeling that if men became pregnant instead of women, there would be absolutely no restriction on reproductive rights, which is a great quote. And I don't remember where this is, but I know you've said this before, that, frankly, on all of these things, all of us men should just leave the room and leave our opinion aside, I'd say, in an opinion video about abortion. But, anyways, we should leave the room and just not having anything to do with it, because it's not our decision. It should be the decision of women. I'm behind that, absolutely. So there you go. The goals for this is to protect the right to privacy of American women and to treat women equally. And equal, in case that was unclear, equal means equal. Equal means the same as. So does a man have the right to do whatever with their body? Yes, they do. In fact, they have a lot more. We as men have a lot more sort of leeway in many ways culturally, and all sorts of different things. Do women have that same right? Yes, they do. Again, do men have the decision to make poor decisions for themselves, right? If we believe that abortion is a poor decision for someone. I know I have a good friend who she didn't even have any abortions. She had 3, I believe, miscarriages. They were completely from medical issues. She almost killed herself. In fact, she tried to kill herself because of the grief of losing those 3 children. I can only imagine uh, what that would be like, having to make that decision on behalf of another human being. Um, However, we as human beings, women, have this right and this responsibility to make the decision of what's going to happen now. They also have, we believe, the moral side of this is you also have that the responsibility and the repercussions for that decision are going to be yours. So it's a weighty thing, right? However, I, as a man, as a white person, as anything, I should not be restricting someone else's choices just because I think. I should do all that I can to put them in a better situation. There's a lot of things that go into this abortion issue, and part of it is, frankly, our adoption system is so screwed up, right? It is almost impossible. We have had challenges in conceiving, my wife and I. We have one son, and he is wonderful and amazing. God has not chosen to give us another one for medical reasons. Or I assume that there's other reasons from God's perspective, but for on the medical side, there are reasons that we do not have a second child. We might consider adopting. We have considered the idea of adopting, but we can't adopt because we are not independently wealthy. Adoption is so stinking expensive. It is so bureaucratic. It is so messed up, the whole system. That's part of this, right? If women felt that having their child adopted was actually going to be a better situation for them than having them killed, then they would make that decision more often. But frankly, it's not that kind of kids in foster care do not have good lives necessarily, and that is a problem with us. Women who are single and have children, for whatever reason that may be, it could be death, it could be divorce, it could be 100,000 different reasons, and are 100,000 different reasons. If we as a culture were supporting women who had children and were trying to raise them by themselves, there would be a lot more, there would be a lot fewer abortions if we as a culture were supporting women, right? If we as a culture were supporting parents more. Being a parent is really, really difficult. And being a parent in the 21st century is exceedingly difficult. It's more difficult, I believe, than it has been in the past. And yet our brains do this reset thing where once we have children, right, you get older and you go, oh yeah, it was easy, it was no problem, because you were brain damaged during that time. You had no sleep and you had no idea what was going on, and so you don't retain those memories apparently. Um, the gall of someone coming by at the park and saying, oh, you'll miss these days. No, I will not. I will not remember these days. Um, I will cherish the high points that I choose to remember from these days. Absolutely. But it's not easy, right? And we as a culture do not support people who raise their children, right? You look at it in the workflows that we are asking of adults, right? We You see it in how very little time is given to a woman after she has had a child, let alone how much time is given to the man, right? That's paternal, what is it? Paternal break or whatever, right? That's kind of there, okay, but it's really sketchy and it's not that long, right? Paternal time off for a baby is almost unheard of. That's a problem with us as a culture. We do not actually, so we try to pretend that we hold up childbirth. Try to and pretend that we are holding up parenthood, yet we don't actually, right? don't actually put our money where our mouth is. So if we were to do these things, would we see a difference in the number of abortions? I think so, right? If we were to support people. Sorry, a little rant there, a little sermon. That's okay. Let's see. As president, I will appoint judges who support a woman's right to choose, makes sense, and support a woman's right to choose in every circumstance, and provide resources for planning and contraception, right? And so that's the deep dive of that. That's the full policy that is available. Join the fight, and we can donate all that sort of stuff. Definitely do donate to the campaign if you haven't done so already, and if you have done so already, do some more, right? Because campaigns cost money, and that's how this thing works. But definitely, give me some more conversation about this issue. It is a challenging issue. It is an emotional issue. It is something that I wish none of us had to deal with, the fact that that women are killing their children, right? That's not fun. The 60 million abortions that have happened since Roe v. Wade, I don't say, oh, great, that's so wonderful. And frankly, I don't think anybody says, oh, that's such a great thing. I'm so happy that happened, right? There are individual stories, and there are women and men who were faced with serious, tough decisions and had to make this one, and felt that that was the best decision for their lives at the time. Absolutely. Why don't we extend that freedom? Why don't we extend that right? Why don't we make sure that that option is available to everyone, no matter their class or their race or their gender? Maybe not gender, because don't get abortions. But anyways, you know what I mean, right? Why don't we just extend this to everyone and provide a culture and a society in which we actually hold people up who have children, where we actually support women and men who choose to keep children and to raise children, and we create a society in which we are actually holding up childbirth and raising children as a valuable thing. Universal basic income, freedom dividend, that's going to do that. We as a culture coming around this idea and looking for a solution where we can, yes, provide access, but also create an environment in which it happens less. I think that's what all of us would like. And if we are so hardline that we say, oh, well, as long as you're not making it legal, then I'm not going to vote for you, we're never going to find that solution, right? We don't live in the magical super world where only people who are ready to have children will be pregnant. We don't live in that world, right? So how do we deal with the world that exists around us? How do we deal with our own cultural sin of how we have dealt with parents, how we have dealt with single mothers, how we have dealt with the adoption system, how we have dealt with all of these things, because we have created this problem. So how are we going to fix it? How is God calling us to use the things that we have, the abilities that we have, the technology that we have? How can we use those things to make sure that abortion is available, maybe, but is in fact actually rare, is in fact safe, is in fact, I don't remember the other one, is the safe and rare, whatever that is, right? Why don't we do that? Why don't we create that world in which, because we can't create a world in which only people who are ready to have children will be pregnant. How do we create a world in which that will happen? In which women and men make those decisions, or maybe they're going to keep this child when they wouldn't have done so already. Maybe they're going to raise this child when maybe they would not have otherwise. Maybe they will have this child and put it up for adoption where they may not have made that decision before. How do we create a world in which that happens? How do we create a world in which young people actually do have access to this, and maybe they make decisions that they want to have sex, right? It happens. All of us have done it, right? Um, how do we do that in such a way that means that a child's life is not on? How do we make those cultural changes so that we as a culture are going to be better, as a society, as a nation? Um, I think that's the bigger question, right? How do we do this in a way that is indeed faithful? So those are my thoughts. Those are my concerns. Those are all of those sorts of things. I would love to hear yours. Give your comments. Give your information. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let's have an ongoing conversation about this. Um, Definitely like this video, share it with someone else. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Click the notification button. Follow me on Twitter at pastors4y, and yeah, all the things that all of the YouTubers ask you to do. But let's close in prayer. Lord God, thank you for this day. Thank you for the blessing and the beauty of children. Thank you for the joys and the pains that they bring. Lord God, we are sorry for the many children who have been infants. We grieve their loss. We grieve a society and a culture in which this could happen in such staggering numbers. We especially grieve for all of the things going on in especially minority communities in which especially African American women are using abortion at an insanely higher rate than white women. God, we grieve that we have created this society in which it is the decision to have a child put up for adoption or killing them is a hard decision. Lord God, in all of these things, we pray that you would work in us. See if there's any wicked way in us. Help us to create a world and a nation in which abortion would happen less frequently. When it did, it would be safe and rare. Lord God, I pray that this issue would, while it is a passionate issue, it is an emotional issue, that it would not be an issue that would sideline people. That it might be an issue that we could come together on instead of be separated. Lord God, we thank you for this day, for all that you do in and through us. We pray all these things in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. All right. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time. And yeah, humanity.